Now, I'd like to invite Professor Kim Sunhyuk, Korea University, the discussant. Now, Professor Kim, please.
Thank you very much. And it's a great pleasure to be here. And I thank Professor Yamagata, Takayanagi, Ono, and Uesu, and Kondo, all for your presentations. And because you have already published that book, and it's a seminal book on the comparative aspect of international development cooperation of Japan and South Korea, I first want to congratulate on the publication of a very seminal and very uniquely comparative book, and which is not really frequent in the literature. And I think that it's a uniquely comparative framework for ameliorating the scattered and fragmented nature of the existing literature on this aspect. So I congratulate you on that. And so I will focus on some of my subjective reflections on some of the points that are already raised. And already there are a lot of discussions on similarities and contrast between the two countries. And I'd like to extend that discussion a little bit more. Because I mean, there are already similarities like the proportion of ODA for CSOs or regional focus and so on. And also some of the similarities are actually catching up. I mean, South Korea is catching up with Japan in terms of some of the traits of international development cooperation. Like, for example, this increased attention to MDGs and SDGs and so on. But there are also lingering contrasts and differences, I think, which in my opinion, which are related with these, pretty contrasting development of civil society in the two countries. In South Korea, civil society is inseparable from this very tumultuous history of democratization. Civil society has been at the center of this political struggle against developmental state. And also the civic mobilization, I mean, you can see the role of civic mobilization at basically at every corner of historic South Korean political events. So maybe that is the reason why you see more advocacy, more comprehensive, more inclusive, more solidarity-oriented CSOs in Korea, while you don't have, you have more sector-specific CSOs in Japan. At the same time, also, I think that history is also related with the fact that South Korea has more awareness raising, politicized, and advocacy CSOs, while in Japan, you are more focusing on information provision, or more implementation, or more functional. And that's actually related to the fact that, South Korean civic activists and Japanese civic activists are always envious of each other. I mean, the envy is mutual because South Korean activists are envious of Japanese civil societies' local problem solving, very pragmatic, local problem solving capacity, while Japanese activists are envious of South Korean civil society groups' central political influence. So, I mean, that's very contrasting in the two countries. At the same time, I think I'd like to raise this one question, I mean, that was raised in the Korean in the Korean presentation, this chapter on civil society-state relations, which is, I mean, using, I think, Najam's categories, so 4 categories. Basically, the narrative is pretty simple. In the case of South Korea, the state-civil society relations have evolved from complementarity, confrontation, to cooperation, and now institutional cooperation, which approaches kind of collaboration. So happily ever after kind of story. I'm not really sure. I mean, if we consider this whole configuration of civil society in South Korea, a lot of civil society, I'm not sure about international development cooperation sector, but a lot of civil society groups in South Korea are excessively politicized recently, right? And also, I don't think this cooptation or even incorporation by the very strong developmental or post-developmental or neo-developmental state is not, I think it's not a vacant category. It's not an empty category, null category. And I think there is something that we should reflect on whether cooptation really is happening in both countries, because I think that Japan has also very pretty effective and pretty strong state. I think in the name of voluntariness, maybe there are a lot of things going on in terms of the maneuvering of the state, of civil society, and so on. This presentation chapter on state business cooperation in international development cooperation in Japan, I have so many things. I think that South Korea has so many things to learn from the Japanese case. I think there are so many interesting cases, like this fascinating story of this, how international development cooperation evolved into quality growth, inclusive, sustainable, and resilient growth. I think this would provide a lot of lessons for Korea. And also this idea of test bed cases in Japan, for example, putting into practice new modalities to invite, test, and verify ideas and technologies, through this partnership with business sector. I think that's something definitely South Korea need to emulate. And I think in comparative perspective, I think Japan has a broader gamut of support for private firms, fact-finding surveys, pilot and dissemination programs, financial cooperation, human resources development, grant aid, and so on. You have a broader variety of instruments for facilitating and promoting PPP in international development cooperation, and that's something also South Korea needs to work on a little bit more. This Lake Biwa model, I think this really represents a case that where you have this domestic problem solving, you are basically translating that into something in the realm of international development cooperation. So basically packaging that as an exportable item, successful domestic problem solving package abroad. So I think that's something also South Korea can work on. I think the most fascinating story is about this Tunisia and Mozambique examples. I think this great collaboration of different actors, I think that's something also South Korea needs to learn from. Let me finally make some general comments for future research. I think this point has already been made, but I think there is this great need for collective and collaborative leadership of the two countries. I mean, we should go beyond history. We should go beyond regional geopolitics. We are, after all, we are the two leading beacon, democracies in Asia. We are the two prosperous economies in Asia, and we have historic mission to collaborate with each other. And I think that this international development cooperation is a perfect example for furthering our collaboration and sharing, information sharing, and strategic, joint strategic planning, and so on. So we can eventually contribute to the provision of global goods. I think there is no better area in which our two countries, collaborate with each other. So we need to sense that historic mission to collaborate with each other. Secondly, I think for the future research project, I think there should be more empirical comparisons. I think there are, the chapters are not really even. I mean, some chapters have empirical cases, some chapters are not, do not deal with empirical cases. So it would be great if we have truly empirical kind of comparisons of the two countries that would also contribute to building an Asian model of Asian model of international development cooperation. And lastly, I think we need to go beyond bilaterality in international development cooperation. I think we can think of some innovative examples of Japan, South Korea, and recipient country kind of trilateral collaboration. For example, South Korea, Japan, the recipient country kind of creative, innovative collaboration is the way to go in terms of, and that would further develop our collaboration between the two countries. Thank you very much.
Professor Kim Sunhyuk, thank you very much for wide range comments. Then quickly, let me respond to points of empirical comparison. In fact, I know that Professor Kim Yumi made empirical comparison among 3 countries, China, Japan, and Korea in other literature. So that is one of contribution. Then I think insightful comments were given to civil society issues. So then it seems Professor Hon is gone.
Yeah, she's not here. Yeah.
So that Professor Takayanagi, you are responsible for responding to questions. So please.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Professor Yamagata. Dr. Ji Young Hon left a message that she had to go. So she has left already. But anyway, there was an important question from Dr. Imuk Park. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. But and also this has something to do with part of the comments by Dr. Sunhyuk Kim. But there is an important question on the dilemma between the partnership with the government and the independence of civil society. And this is a question that has really been discussed since maybe late 1960s, 1970s, when countries in Western Europe and North America have started funding schemes for supporting NGOs. And of course, it has always been questioned that because of the government funding, maybe NGOs would change their regional focus or sectoral priorities, or maybe weaken their roles as watchdogs of government aid policy. So that's really an important question, and this question has always been this has always been a question in the past half a century or more, since many of the countries have started partnering with civil society. And of course, these are the questions that were pointed to civil society. Also, it's true that, for example, these things happened in Canada or Finland after the turn of the century, that when the government changed, and also their aid policy and their policy regarding support for civil society have changed. Many of the civil society organizations lost funding, and some of them were not able to survive. So we have to stop this from happening. So of course, it has always been, civil society has been emphasizing their roles as independent development actors in their own right. Actually, Dr. Ji Young Hong and myself have been friends since around when CSOs were preparing for the high-level forum and for aid effectiveness in 2011. So we've been friends for like almost a dozen of years. So independent development actors in their own right is what CSOs have emphasized as their roles in international development. And also, this part, when the OECD DAC in their process to agreeing on the recommendation that I have referred to, they did a research, and they found that CSOs, although they are getting increased funding, many of them, they didn't really give the figures, but certain part of that funding came as a kind of being a contractor of bilateral aid projects, and so that's one of the reasons why that in that recommendation or the OECD research that came out before the recommendation that CSO's roles as independent actors in their own right should be emphasized as well as partners for the aid policy. So of course, this is not an easy question to be answered, but this is a question we really have to tackle. And of course, OECD DAC is now OECD, actually the DCD, and also there is a team on civil society. They are developing now a toolkit to implement the recommendation. And also, of course, CSOs themselves, they are planning developing toolkits themselves. And in 5 years, there will be a monitoring report on implementation recommendations. So let's see what happens. And of course, I have to say that, of course, there are no clear answers to this, but this is really an important question that was addressed. So thank you very much for the question.
Professor Takayanagi, thank you very much for addressing to the questions. I regret to say that we always short in time of our discussion, and it is applicable to the sessions today as well. So that I have to conclude the second session. So I'd like Professor Hakju Kwon to conclude and finish the whole seminar. Professor Kwon, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for Professor Yamagata to give me a chance to give some brief concluding remark. First of all, I would like to express my thanks to all participants today. Your interest in the book, and thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And also, I'd like to express that my pleasure with working with Professor Yamagata and Professor Kondo and Professor Kim, the co-editors, and also all contributors to the book. Last 2 years was a very, very good experience. And it was really valuable experience for me. And all Korean scholars and Japanese scholars are very efficient and effective. Otherwise, we cannot produce this book in 2 years' time during the pandemic. So I appreciate that effort. And I think this collaboration is only possible because we have past experience, relations. The former president of 2 associations contribute. Today, I especially like to thank Professor Kim Eun-mi, who started this exchange between 2 academic associations. And that is one solid, concrete outcome is this book. And I also hope that we can continue our collaboration in both countries, and also academic collaboration, further more systematic, more analytical, empirical, comparative work will be produced in the future. And thank you very much. I really enjoyed the seminar today. Thank you very much.